I bet 3 million that no one can touch my bull. But the cowboy's son shocked everyone. Franklin Johnson was about to make the riskiest bet of his life. The most stubborn rancher in all of Texas had decided to wager $3 million that no one could lay a hand on his champion bull Emperor. The massive black animal, weighing nearly a ton, snorted inside the makeshift pen at the county fairgrounds. Michael Johnson watched his father with growing concern, his cowboy hat in hand as he searched for the right words to talk him out of this madness. "Dad, are you sure about this? 3 million is no joke," Michael said, his voice heavy with worry. Franklin adjusted his leather belt and stared firmly at his son. At 65, the man still carried the proud demeanor that had earned him respect among cattle ranchers, but Michael had noticed something different in his father's eyes these past few months. "Son, I raised this bull from a calf. I know every move he makes. Every. No one but me can get close to Emperor. It's guaranteed money." The county fairgrounds buzzed with the arrival of ranchers from across the state. News of the bet had spread like wildfire, drawing onlookers, gamblers, and especially Walter Barnes, the businessman who owned the largest meatpacking plants in the region. Walter stepped out of his imported pickup truck, followed by 3 men Michael recognized as the best wranglers on his team. His father's longtime business rival smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Franklin, my old friend, I came in person to witness this historic bet," Walter said, extending a hand that Franklin shook with excessive firmness. "Walter, brought your best men, I see. Well, you know I respect your reputation, but 3 million, that's enough to make anyone try their luck." Michael felt a chill down his spine. He'd known Walter for years and was well aware the man never made a move without calculating every angle. His presence here meant there was more at stake than just a simple bet. The first challenger was an experienced ranch hand from a neighboring farm. The man approached the pen with confidence, but the moment he reached toward Emperor, the bull charged the wooden fence with such fury that everyone jumped back. "Next!" Franklin shouted, clearly pleased. One by one, the men tried to approach the animal. Ranch hands, cowboys, even Walter's wranglers failed miserably. Emperor seemed to sense the intentions of anyone who came near and reacted with increasing aggression. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now back to the story. Katherine Johnson arrived at the county fairgrounds carrying little Matthew in her arms. Franklin's daughter-in-law, a delicate woman of 30, seemed out of place amid all the commotion and dust. "Matthew wanted to see Grandpa," she explained to Michael, setting the 3-year-old down. The little boy wore a denim shirt just like his father's and a straw hat that was too big for his small head. His curious eyes darted around with the typical wonder of a child. "Where's Grandpa Frank?" Matthew asked, using the affectionate nickname he'd made up for his grandfather. "He's over there doing business, son," Michael replied, scooping the boy into his arms. "Better stay here, away from the bull." But Matthew had already spotted Emperor, and his eyes lit up. To everyone's surprise, the bull, who had spent hours displaying extreme aggression, lifted his head toward the child and let out a low, almost friendly bellow. "Daddy, it's Emperor!" Matthew exclaimed, clapping his hands. Michael froze. How on earth did his son know the bull's name? He had never taken the boy to see the animals on his grandfather's farm, precisely because he considered them too dangerous. Meanwhile, Franklin was speaking quietly with a man in a suit whom Michael didn't recognize. His father's expression grew tenser as the conversation continued. "Mr. Johnson, you have until the end of the month to settle the loan. If you can't, we'll have to foreclose on the mortgage," said the man, tucking some papers into his jacket pocket. "I know my obligations," Franklin replied sharply. Michael felt the ground give way beneath him. Mortgage. His father had mortgaged the farm. Why? The family property had always been prosperous with healthy herds and fertile land. The day wore on, and a dozen more men tried to touch the Emperor without success. With each failed attempt, Walter smiled wider, as if he knew something the others didn't. "Franklin, it's getting late," said Walter, checking his wristwatch. "My men have already tried. Why don't you show us how it's done?" "That wasn't the deal," Franklin retorted. "The bet was about other people touching the bull, not me. Ah, but wouldn't it be interesting to see the great Franklin Johnson in action, don't you think? Walter directed the question to the small crowd that had gathered. Michael saw the trap. Walter was provoking his father's pride, knowing Franklin would hardly refuse a public challenge to his skill. Sure enough, Franklin couldn't resist. He stepped into the pen to the applause of the onlookers and walked toward the emperor. The bull, which had spent hours in a state of agitation, immediately calmed in the presence of its owner. Franklin stroked the animal's muzzle with familiarity, showing the connection he had described to his son. The crowd murmured in awe. "Well, look at that," Walter said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Seems only Franklin can manage it. But that doesn't count for the bet, of course." It was then that Catherine lost sight of Matthew. She had been chatting with other ranchers' wives when she realized the boy was no longer beside her. "Matthew, Matthew, where are you?" she called, panic immediately filling her voice. Michael, who had been watching his father in the pen, turned in alarm at his wife's shouts. When he scanned the area, his heart nearly stopped. Matthew was walking determinedly toward the pen where the emperor stood. His blue denim shirt stood out against the packed dirt, and his straw hat swayed with each purposeful step. "Matthew, no!" Michael shouted, running toward his son. But the boy had already slipped beneath the fence rails. Franklin, who was on the other side petting the bull, turned sharply at his son's cry. The crowd fell completely silent. All conversation ceased. The only sound was the soft patter of Matthew's small feet as he approached the nearly 1-ton bull. The emperor turned its head toward the child. For one terrifying moment, no one knew what to expect. The bull that had shown extreme aggression toward every experienced adult now faced a defenseless child. Then something happened that no one would ever forget. The emperor slowly lowered its head, almost as if bowing, and stood completely still as Matthew approached. The little boy stretched out his small hand and touched the animal's muzzle with the ease of someone who did this every day. "Hi, buddy," Matthew said in his child's voice, as if greeting a familiar dog. The bull let out a low, gentle moo, unlike any sound it had made all day. It was almost as if it were responding to the greeting. Franklin stood frozen, unsure whether to move and grab his grandson, or if any movement might shatter this surreal moment. Michael stopped a few feet from the fence, his heart pounding so loudly it seemed everyone could hear it. "Good Lord," someone in the crowd murmured. Matthew kept petting the emperor, who remained as gentle as a lamb. The child even pressed his face against the animal's muzzle, a tender gesture that drew sighs from the audience. It was Walter who broke the magical silence. "Well, Franklin, looks like someone managed to touch your unbeatable bull," he said, his voice dripping with triumphant satisfaction. $3 million. I hope you have the cash on hand." "Walter, he's just a child," protested Franklin, finally moving to pick Matthew up. "My own grandson." The bet was clear. No one could touch the bull, and I'd say this child didn't just touch him, he's practically hugging the animal. The crowd began to murmur. Some agreed with Walter, others thought it unfair to demand payment over a child. Michael stepped into the pen and lifted Matthew, checking if the boy was okay. "Daddy, the emperor is my friend," said Matthew, stretching his little arms toward the still calm bull. "What do you mean, son? You've never seen this bull before," Michael replied, confused. "Yes, I have. He comes to my window every night to talk to me." Catherine, who had approached the fence, turned pale. Michael's house was at the back of Franklin's property, near the pastures where some animals stayed at night. "Matthew, what are you talking about?" she asked. "The emperor leaves the corral and comes to check on me. We talk through the window, I tell him stories." Franklin looked at his grandson with an expression mixing surprise and something that seemed like guilt. "Dad," Michael said, his voice quiet but firm, "did you know about this?" Before Franklin could answer, Walter interrupted the family conversation. "Touching as all this is business. 3 million, Franklin, and I've got a crowd here as witnesses." "I don't have 3 million in cash," Franklin admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "No? Well, then we'll have to discuss other forms of payment," Walter said, pulling some papers from his pocket. "By any chance did you recently mortgage the ranch?" Michael's blood ran cold. Walter knew about the mortgage, more than that. He seemed to know far more about the family's finances than he should. "How do you know that?" Franklin asked suspiciously. "Franklin, old friend, do you think I'd make a $3 million bet without making sure you could pay? I bought your debts from the bank last week." The pen fell into absolute silence. Michael felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Walter had bought his father's debts? That meant... "That's right," Walter continued, as if reading Michael's thoughts. "Now I'm the one who decides what happens to your ranch, and with this lost bet, I'd say our negotiation just got a lot more interesting." "Dad, what debts are these?" Michael asked, still holding Matthew. Franklin looked at his son and then at his daughter-in-law, shame clear on his aged face. "Son, I didn't want you to know, the last 2 years the ranch hasn't been as profitable. Last year's drought, falling cattle prices, some bad investment decisions, and you decided to hide this from us," Catherine interjected, her voice trembling with emotion. "I thought I could fix it alone. I always have, but the debts kept piling up and now you're betting money you don't have," Michael finished, disappointment heavy in his voice. Matthew, oblivious to the family tension, kept looking at the Emperor and waving at the animal. "Grandpa Frank, why is everyone mad? The Emperor just wanted to show he likes me." The innocent words of the child made Franklin look at his grandson with a devastated expression. Matthew was right. The bull had shown a genuine connection with the boy, something Franklin himself had noticed weeks ago but chose to ignore. "Matthew," Franklin said, his voice choked, "do you really talk to the Emperor?" "I do, Grandpa. He gets sad when he's alone. I tell him the stories Mommy reads to me." Catherine covered her mouth with her hands. She now remembered all those nights she had found Matthew standing by his bedroom window, whispering softly. She had always thought he was just playing make-believe. "Franklin," Walter interrupted impatiently, "this family moment is touching, but we still have a financial matter to settle." "Walter, give the man a minute to process the situation," said one of the ranchers present. "A minute? He's had months to sort out his affairs. Now it's time to face the consequences." That's when Michael noticed something strange. Throughout the entire argument, Walter had seemed overly confident, as if he already knew the bet's outcome would favor him. "Walter," Michael said, narrowing his eyes, "how were you so sure someone would be able to touch the bull?" "Well, it was only a matter of time. With so many experienced men trying—" "No," Michael cut him off. "You knew Matthew could do it. You knew about his connection with the Emperor." The silence that followed was telling. Walter glanced away for just a fraction of a second, long enough to confirm Michael's suspicions. "How did you find out?" Michael asked, his voice thick with rising anger. "I don't know what you're talking about," Walter replied, but his earlier confidence was gone. Catherine, still thinking about the nights she'd found Matthew by the window, had a sudden realization. "Michael, remember last week when you went out to check that noise in the pasture?" "I do. I thought it was cattle rustlers. What if it wasn't? What if someone was watching, studying the animal's behavior?" All eyes turned to Walter, who now looked visibly uncomfortable. "You're all imagining things," he said, but his voice sounded forced. "Dad," Michael said, turning to Franklin, "did you know Matthew had this connection with the Emperor?" Franklin sighed deeply before answering. "I did, son. I started suspecting weeks ago. I noticed the Emperor was calmer on certain nights, and once I saw him near the back fence close to your house, and you didn't say anything. I had other plans for that information." Michael felt a chill in his stomach. "What other plans?" "Dad, what plans?" "Son, the financial situation is worse than you think. Much worse. The debts aren't just from the ranch. I made some bad investments, gambled on deals that didn't work out." "How much?" Catherine asked, her voice barely a whisper. $8 million. The number dropped like a bomb on the family. $8 million was far more than the entire ranch was worth. "My God, Dad, how did it come to this?" Michael looked like he might pass out. One thing led to another. First the drought, then cattle prices plummeted. I tried to make up for it by investing elsewhere, but you gambled away everything you didn't have, Michael finished bitterly. "And now," Walter interrupted, smiling again, "we're looking at $9 million in debt, counting today's bet." Matthew, who had been silently watching the adults, suddenly squirmed in his father's arms. "Daddy, can I get down? I want to talk to the Emperor." "Matthew, this isn't the time. Please, Daddy. The Emperor is sad. He can feel when people are angry." Michael looked at the bull and noticed the animal did seem agitated by the tension in the air. His dark eyes darted nervously between the people gathered. "All right, but stay close to me." Matthew ran back to the Emperor and reached out his little hand to touch the animal's muzzle. Immediately, the bull calmed down. "Easy there, big guy. I'll figure out a way to help," the boy whispered. The child's words struck Franklin like lightning. His 3-year-old grandson was trying to comfort him through the bull, while he had spent months hiding problems and making situations even worse. "Matthew," Franklin said, kneeling to his grandson's level. "Grandpa made some mistakes, big mistakes." "Everybody makes mistakes, Grandpa Frank. Mommy says what matters is fixing them afterward." The boy's simple words echoed through the silence of the county fairgrounds. Even some of the spectators who had gathered seemed moved by the innocence of the moment. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. "Walter," a firm voice called from behind them. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Anthony Miller, a respected rancher in the area and president of the local Farmers Association. "Anthony," Walter replied, visibly annoyed by the interruption, "I just had a very interesting conversation with your former employee, John Smith. Seems he has some information about your business practices that might interest everyone here." John Smith, a middle-aged man with a humble appearance, stepped forward. Michael recognized him as someone who had worked in Walter's meatpacking plants for many years. "Mr. Walter," John said, his voice trembling slightly, "I can't stay quiet anymore about what I've seen." "John, you don't know what you're talking about," Walter snapped. "Oh, I do, boss. I worked 15 years at your company. Saw a lot of things I shouldn't have." The tension in the air was palpable. Even Matthew seemed to sense something important was happening and moved closer to the Emperor. "What kind of things, John?" Anthony asked. "Well, for starters, the feed he ordered to be given to other ranchers' bulls before competitions, substances that made the animals more aggressive." The revelation hit like a bomb. Several ranchers in the crowd began murmuring among themselves, remembering competitions where their animals had behaved strangely. "That's a lie!" Walter shouted. "No, it's not, boss. I've got the receipts right here," John said, pulling crumpled papers from his pocket. "I kept them all these years because I knew I'd need them someday." "John," Franklin said, his voice filled with growing hope. "Are you sure about what you're saying?" "Absolutely, Mr. Franklin. And that's not all. Mr. Walter also spread rumors about other ranchers to drive down prices at sale time. There's a whole list of people he's hurt over the years." Michael looked at Walter and saw the man had completely lost his composure. The businessman who minutes ago seemed in control was now sweating nervously. "Franklin," Anthony said, "seems you weren't the only one hurt by Walter's schemes." "Schemes?" Catherine asked. "Yes, ma'am. If what John's saying is true, Walter's been rigging competitions and sabotaging other producers for years to build his empire." "What about my father's debts?" Michael asked. "Oh, that's interesting," John said. "Mr. Walter has a deal with some banks. He gets tipped off about struggling ranchers and offers them loans with sky-high interest. When they can't pay, he buys up the debt for pennies and takes their land." The crowd grew restless. Many ranchers recognized the pattern John described from their own experiences or those of people they knew. "That means," Michael began, "it means your father was the victim of an elaborate scheme," Anthony completed. "And I'd bet today's wager was planned too." All eyes turned back to Walter, who now looked like a cornered animal. "Walter," said Franklin, his voice low but firm, "you knew about Matthew and the Emperor. It wasn't a question. It was a statement." Walter started, but his voice failed him. "John?" said Anthony. "How did Walter find out about the child's connection to the bull?" John looked at Walter with disgust before answering. He had some employees watch Mr. Franklin's ranch these past weeks. They said it was to evaluate the cattle for a potential purchase, but they were really studying the animals' habits. "And they discovered Matthew had a special bond with the Emperor," continued Michael, understanding the whole scheme. "Exactly. Mr. Walter knew if the child showed up at the event, he could touch the bull. That's why he was so sure about the bet. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound. Matthew was laughing. The child had started playing with the emperor, who was now completely relaxed and even let the boy rest his head against his neck. "Grandpa Frank," said Matthew, still stroking the bull, "the emperor wants to know if he can stay with me forever." "What do you mean, son?" "He's tired of being alone. He wants a real family, not just to be used for making money." The child's words struck Franklin deeply. He looked at the bull he had raised since it was young and realized that, in his obsession with money and prestige, he had lost sight of the animal's well-being. "Matthew is right," said a woman's voice. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was a woman Michael didn't recognize, dressed professionally and carrying a briefcase. "Who are you?" asked Franklin. "My name is Dr. Lillian Parker. I'm a veterinarian specializing in animal behavior. I came here because I heard about the bet and was curious." "And what did you mean by Matthew being right?" "I observed the interaction between the child and the bull. It's extremely rare but not impossible. Some animals develop deep connections with specific humans, especially children, because they don't carry the tensions and fears adults do." Dr. Lillian approached the fence and watched Matthew and the emperor with a professional eye. This bull isn't naturally aggressive. He was stressed and defensive because he sensed the tensions and intentions of the adults approaching him. But with the child, "It's different," Catherine finished, finally understanding. "Exactly. The child approaches without fear, without ulterior motives, just with genuine affection. The animal senses that and responds in kind." "Doctor," said Michael, "does that mean the emperor could be gentle with other people too?" "With the right people, yes, but it would take time and a lot of behavioral work." Franklin looked at his grandson playing with the bull and felt something he hadn't in months: hope. "Doctor, do you think we could use this connection for something productive?" "How so?" "Well, I was thinking, if Matthew has this special ability with animals, maybe we could find a way to turn it into something that helps others." "Interesting. Are you thinking of animal-assisted therapy?" "I'm not entirely sure what that is, but it sounds promising." Dr. Lillian smiled for the first time since arriving. "Animal-assisted therapy is a growing field. We use trained animals to help people with various challenges: children with autism, seniors in recovery, people with disabilities." "And can large animals like bulls be used?" asked Catherine, interested. "It's less common but perfectly possible. In fact, the strength and presence of larger animals can be extremely therapeutic for certain conditions." Michael looked at his father and saw that Franklin was deep in thought. He recognized that expression. His father had an idea. "Doctor," said Franklin, "how much would it cost to set up a program like this?" "Well, that would depend on the scope of the project, but I can say there are investors interested in innovative animal therapy programs." It was then that Anthony Miller spoke up again. "Franklin, before making new plans, we need to resolve the current situation. John, do you have concrete evidence of Walter's schemes?" "Yes, I do, Mr. Anthony. 15 years of receipts, recordings, documents. I kept everything." "Recordings?" asked Michael. "Yes. Mr. Walter was always careless around the employees. He thought we were invisible. But I recorded many conversations where he admitted to his illegal practices. Walter, who had tried to stay quiet hoping the situation would calm down, realized he was losing control completely. "You can't prove anything," he said, but his voice sounded desperate. "Walter," Anthony said firmly, "I think you'd better start cooperating. If half of what John is saying is true, you have much bigger problems than a bet." "What kind of problems?" asked Catherine. "Fraud, market manipulation, extortion, crimes that could lead to prison, and more importantly for you, restitution for the damages caused." Franklin looked at Walter with an expression mixing anger and disappointment. "Walter, why? We were neighbors. We've known each other for decades." "Business, Franklin, nothing personal." "Nothing personal? You almost destroyed my family." Matthew, who had noticed the adults were speaking loudly again, ran to his grandfather. Grandpa Frank, don't be mad. The Emperor said everything will be fine. What do you mean, my grandson? He said that when people do bad things, other good people come to help, like the vet lady and Mr. John. Franklin looked at his grandson and then at the people around him. John, who had risked his safety to expose the truth. Anthony, who had led the discovery of the schemes. Dr. Lillian, who had appeared at the right time with knowledge and hope. Matthew is right, he said, his voice choked. Sometimes bad things serve to show us who the good people in our lives are. Dad, said Michael, placing a hand on Franklin's shoulder, we'll solve this. Together. But how? Even if Walter returns the money he stole, we still have legitimate debts. Franklin, Dr. Lillian interrupted. May I make a proposal? Of course, Doctor. I know some investors who would be interested in funding an animal-assisted therapy project, especially if it were as innovative as what you're suggesting. But I don't know anything about this kind of business. You don't need to. You have the land, the animals, and most importantly, you have Matthew and his special ability. I can provide the technical knowledge and investor contacts. Catherine looked at Michael with a hopeful expression. For the first time in months, there seemed to be light at the end of the tunnel. What kind of investment would be needed? Asked Michael. For a pilot project, I'd estimate between $2 to $3 million, but if it works, the return would be much greater. 2 to 3 million, repeated Franklin. It's less than our debts, but it's still a lot of money. Dad, said Michael, an idea forming in his mind, what if we didn't need that much outside money? What do you mean? What if we used part of the ranch as collateral for the investment but kept ownership? Anthony Miller, who had been listening quietly, intervened. Michael has a good idea. With the evidence John has against Walter, you'll probably be able to recover a good portion of the lost money. And with a solid animal therapy project, the banks would be willing to renegotiate the debts, added Dr. Lillian. I've seen similar cases where innovative social projects received special financing terms. Matthew, who had heard the word project, ran over to the adults. What project, Grandpa Frank? A project where you and the Emperor could help other kids, my grandson. Other kids like me? Kids who are sad or sick? You could teach them how to talk to animals like you do. Matthew's eyes lit up. The Emperor would love that. He's always happy when he sees me smiling. If he could make other kids smile too, it would be the most important job of his life, finished Franklin, finally understanding the magnitude of what was being proposed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Walter, who had tried to discreetly slip away during the conversation about the project, was intercepted by Anthony Miller. Walter, don't even think about leaving. We have a lot to discuss. Anthony, this is all a misunderstanding. John, said Anthony, can you show some of that evidence for everyone to see? John opened his folder and pulled out several documents. The first was a receipt for the purchase of chemicals intended to alter animal behavior. This one is from 3 months ago, said John. Mr. Walter ordered this to be mixed into the feed of the bulls competing in the regional event. Several ranchers present recognized the date. It had been an event where many animals exhibited abnormal behavior, resulting in significant losses for several breeders. And this, John continued, showing another document, is a contract where Walter agreed to pay for information about other ranchers' financial situations. Who provided that information? Asked Franklin. Some bank employees. He paid to find out who was struggling financially. The scale of the scheme was becoming clear. Walter didn't just harm other ranchers directly. He also had a network that allowed him to strike precisely when his victims were most vulnerable. John, said Dr. Lillian, do you have evidence about other ranchers who were harmed? Yes, Doctor. Mr. Walter kept a list. He called them strategic targets. How many names are on that list? Asked Anthony. About 20 ranchers in the region. The number was staggering. 20 families had been deliberately harmed by Walter over the years. Anthony, said Franklin, if this is proven, what would the consequences be for Walter? Well, besides criminal charges, he'd have to repay all the damages. And considering the number of victims, would it be enough to settle our debts? Asked Michael. And then some. It would probably be enough to fully fund the animal therapy project. Matthew, who had gone back to play with the Emperor, suddenly shouted, "Grandpa, come see! The Emperor wants to show you something." Everyone approached the fence. The bull had lain down completely on the ground, something he never did around strangers. Matthew was sitting beside the animal, leaning against his neck. "He said when people stop fighting, he feels calm," explained Matthew. "And when he's calm, other people can come closer too." Dr. Lillian watched the scene with professional interest. "This is extraordinary. The animal is demonstrating a level of trust that normally takes months to develop." "Doctor," said Catherine, "does this mean the project could really work?" "More than that. If we can replicate this connection with other children, we'd be creating something truly revolutionary in the field of animal therapy." Franklin looked at his grandson and the bull, then at his family, and finally at the people who had gathered to help them. For the first time in months, he felt real hope. "Anthony," he said, "how should we proceed with Walter?" "First, we'll document everything John has, then we'll file a civil lawsuit to recover the damages and a criminal one for the crimes committed." "What about today's bet?" "Considering it was based on illegally obtained information, I'd say it's null and void." Walter, who had stayed silent throughout the discussion, finally exploded. "You can't prove anything. It's the word of a disgruntled employee against mine." "Walter," John said calmly, "you forgot one important thing." "What?" John pulled a small recorder from his pocket. "I recorded our conversation yesterday when you told me how you found out about the boy and the bull." Walter's face instantly paled. You recorded me?" "Yes, I did. And it wasn't the first time. I have hours of recordings of you admitting to your schemes." "That's illegal!" "Actually," Anthony interrupted, "under current law, it's legal to record conversations you're part of, as long as it's for your own protection or to report crimes." Walter realized he was completely cornered. He looked around and saw only faces of disapproval and outrage. I can make up for the damages," he said, his voice defeated. "Can you really?" Franklin asked. "And how do you plan to make up for years of suffering for the families you hurt?" "Franklin, I can return everything, with interest. I can even help with your project." "Walter," Michael said, "you still don't get it. It's not about money. It's about what you did to our lives." Matthew, who had noticed the man who was shouting earlier now seemed sad, walked up to Walter. "Uncle, why are you crying?" Walter looked at the child and for the first time seemed to truly understand the magnitude of what he'd done. He had nearly destroyed this innocent child's family out of pure greed. I did some very bad things, son. Everyone does bad things sometimes. My mum says what matters is saying sorry and not doing it again." The simplicity of the child's words brought tears to the eyes of several adults present. Even Walter seemed moved by Matthew's innocence. "Do you think I can say sorry?" Walter asked. "Of course. Everyone deserves a second chance." Franklin looked at his grandson and felt proud of the little man he was becoming. Even towards someone who had caused his family so much pain, Matthew still showed compassion. "Walter," Franklin said, "if you truly want to make amends, there's a way." "How?" "Help us create the Animal Therapy Project. Use your resources to build something that benefits the community instead of harming it." You'd give me that chance?" "Matthew is right. Everyone deserves a second chance, but it'll be the only one you get." John looked at Walter with an expression mixing hope and skepticism. "Boss, if you really want to change, I can help too. I know a lot about your business, and I can make sure everything is done honestly from now on." Dr. Lillian, who had observed the whole interaction, stepped in. "If we're all in agreement, we can start planning the project immediately. I have contacts who can speed up the approval and funding process." "What kind of facilities would we need?" Catherine asked. "Well, we'd need therapy-adapted pens, rooms for sessions, lodging for families coming from far away, and training for the staff," asked Michael. "Yes, a lot of training. Working with animal therapy requires specialized knowledge, but I have contacts with universities that could provide courses and certifications." Matthew ran back to the Emperor, who had stood up, sensing the change in the atmosphere. "Buddy, looks like we've got a lot of work ahead," he said, stroking the bull's muzzle. The animal let out a low, soft moo as if agreeing. "Doctor," said Franklin, "how long would it take to set up a project like this?" "For the basic structure, about 6 months. But to be fully operational, I'd say around 2 years. And the costs? With the compensation Walter will have to pay for the damages, and some investors I know, I'd say it's completely feasible." Anthony Miller, who had been quietly observing the whole conversation, stepped closer to the group. "Franklin, on behalf of the Rural Association, I can say this project would have our full support. It's exactly the kind of initiative our region needs." "Why?" asked Catherine. "Because it's not just about animal therapy. It's about turning a story of suffering into something that can help hundreds of others. It's about showing there's always a way to start over." Matthew, who had listened to Anthony's words, ran back to the group. "Grandpa Frank, does that mean we'll help lots of kids?" "That's right, my boy. You, me, the Emperor, our whole family. We'll work together to help people in need." "And Uncle Walter, too?" Franklin looked at Walter, who waited anxiously for an answer. "If he truly wants to make amends, then yes." "I do," Walter said quickly. "I really do. I spent years doing bad things, hurting people. I want a chance to do something good." John stepped closer to Walter. "Boss, if you're serious, I can help. I know everything about your business, and I can make sure everything's done right from now on." "John, why would you help me after all you've seen?" "Because, like the boy said, everyone deserves a second chance. And because deep down, I know you're not a bad person. Just lost your way." Dr. Lillian checked her watch. "Well, if everyone agrees, I suggest we schedule a meeting for next week. I can bring the investors I mentioned, and we can start planning seriously." "Where should we meet?" asked Michael. "How about at the ranch? That way they can see the project site and meet Matthew and the Emperor in person." "Great idea," Franklin agreed. Matthew clapped his hands excitedly. "We're having visitors. The Emperor will love meeting new people." "Sweetheart," said Catherine, "you'd have to show them how to talk to the Emperor." "Of course, it's easy. Just be gentle and speak softly. He doesn't like loud people." Everyone laughed, remembering how the day had started with shouting and tension, but was now ending with hope and plans for the future. "Dad," said Michael, "I still can't believe how things have changed." "Son, sometimes the worst situations lead us to the best paths. If it weren't for all this, we'd never have discovered Matthew's gift or thought about helping others. And if Walter hadn't tried to hurt us, we'd never have uncovered all his schemes," added Catherine. "That's true," said Anthony. "Sometimes what seems like our ruin ends up being our salvation." Matthew ran to his grandfather and held out his arms to be picked up. "Grandpa Frank, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my boy." "Why do grown-ups make things so complicated? When I talk to the Emperor, it's all simple." Franklin looked at his grandson and then at the people around him. The child's question was simple but profound. "You know, Matthew, I think it's because we've forgotten how to be simple. You children know things we adults have forgotten." "What kind of things?" "How to trust people, how to forgive, how to see the good in people even when they do bad things." Matthew thought for a moment. "Is that why the Emperor likes me? Because I trust him?" "Exactly. And that's why you'll be so good at helping other children, because you know how to make them feel safe." The sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The county fairgrounds, which had been the scene of so much tension just hours before, now breathed peace and hope. Walter approached Franklin. "Franklin, I know words alone aren't enough, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I did to your family and the others. Walter, what matters now is what we do from here on out. Can I count on you to guide me? I don't know how to start making things right." "Yes, you can. We'll all learn together." Dr. Lillian stepped forward to say goodbye. "Well, I have to go, but I'm really excited about this project. You can count on me for anything you need." "Doctor," said Matthew, "will you come back to get to know the Emperor better?" "Of course. In fact, I'll bring some veterinarian friends to meet him too. They'll love seeing the special bond you two have. The Emperor will be happy. He likes making new friends." After the goodbyes, the Johnson family stood alone at the county fairgrounds. The Emperor remained calm in the pen, as if understanding something important had changed. "Dad," said Michael, "how are we going to explain all this to Mum?" Franklin smiled. "We'll tell her the truth, son, that we almost lost everything because of my pride, but we found something much better than money." "What?" "We found our life's purpose." Catherine picked Matthew up in her arms. "Matthew, do you understand our life is going to change a lot?" "Will it be better?" "Much better. You'll get to help lots of children, and the Emperor will have many new friends. And Grandpa Frank won't be sad anymore." "No, my boy, Grandpa won't be sad anymore." As they walked toward the cars, Matthew looked back one last time. "Bye, Emperor. I'll come back tomorrow to talk to you." The bull raised his head and let out a low bellow, like a farewell. 6 months later, the Johnsons' farm had completely transformed. Where there had once been only pastures and traditional pens, there were now modern facilities adapted for animal-assisted therapy. The project, named Animal Heart, welcomed children from all over the state. Matthew, now 4 years old, had become the program's official ambassador, teaching other children how to connect with animals. The Emperor remained the star, but now shared his therapeutic duties with other carefully selected and trained animals. Walter had kept his promise of redemption. Not only had he compensated for all the harm he'd caused, but he'd also become the project's main investor. His meatpacking company had been restructured with ethical practices under the supervision of John Smith, who now held a management position. Franklin, who had discovered his health issues were mainly caused by stress, had fully recovered. He'd found in animal therapy not just a source of income, but a true calling. Michael and Catherine worked together, managing the center, watching Matthew flourish every day in his role as a little therapist. "Dr. Lillian," Matthew said one sunny morning, "the Emperor wants to know if he can work with the new girl today." "Of course, Matthew. She's a little shy, so that'll be perfect." The girl in question was Sophie, a 6-year-old who had developed selective mutism after a family trauma. She hadn't spoken to anyone in months. Matthew approached Sophie with the naturalness that had become his trademark. "Hi, Sophie. Want to meet my friend Emperor?" The girl nodded timidly. "He's very gentle, but he gets sad when people are afraid of him. You're not scared, are you?" Sophie shook her head. "Great. Let's go then." Matthew took Sophie's hand and led her to Emperor, who, as always, showed extraordinary calm around children. "See? He's happy to meet you. You can pet him if you want." Sophie hesitantly reached out a small hand and touched the bull's muzzle. The animal remained perfectly still. "He says you have a beautiful voice," Matthew said. "He wants to hear you speak." Sophie looked at Matthew with surprise. "It's true. He told me you used to sing, and he'd love to hear you." Then it happened. Sophie opened her mouth and for the first time in months whispered, "Hi, Emperor." The moment was witnessed by Dr. Lillian, Franklin, and Sophie's parents, who began to cry with emotion. "Sophie," her mother exclaimed, "you spoke." The girl looked at Matthew and then at Emperor. "He really is my friend," she said now with a firmer voice. "Of course he is, and he has lots of other friends here you'll meet." As Matthew and Sophie continued talking to Emperor, Franklin watched the scene with a heart full of gratitude. "Dad," Michael said, approaching, "what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking I almost lost everything because of pride and greed. And now I see what really mattered was here all along." "What?" "Family, love, the ability to help others." Catherine joined them. "Sophie's mom told me this is the first time she's smiled since the accident." "And it's just the beginning," Franklin said. "We have 15 more kids arriving next week." "Dad, have you ever stopped to think how all this started? With a bet that seemed like our ruin?" "Son, sometimes God uses the toughest situations to show us our true path." Walter walked up to the group. Over the past months, he'd become part of their extended family, always present for important moments. "Franklin, I just spoke with the university. They want to document our project as a model for other states." "That's wonderful. It means we can help even more children. And there's more. A group of investors from New York is interested in funding the project's expansion. Matthew ran over, holding Sophie's hand. Grandpa Frank, Sophie talked to Emperor. I saw, my boy. I'm so proud of you. And Emperor is proud too. He said this is the most important work of his life. Sophie, still shy but clearly more confident, tugged on Franklin's sleeve. Mr. Franklin, can I come here every day? Of course, sweetheart. This is your home now. Dr. Lillian approached the group. Franklin, I need to tell you something important. What is it, Doctor? I got a call from the Department of Health. They want to include our project as a national model for animal-assisted therapy. What does that mean exactly? It means official recognition, government funding, and the chance to replicate this across the country. Catherine covered her mouth with her hands. Are you saying our little farm could become a national reference? Not just could, Catherine. It already is. Matthew, who had overheard part of the conversation, tugged his grandfather's pants. Grandpa, does that mean we'll help kids from all over the United States? Looks like it, my boy. Emperor will love that. He always said he wanted important work. Everyone laughed. Matthew's ability to assign feelings and thoughts to the Emperor had become a trademark that enchanted professionals and families alike. Matthew, said Dr. Lillian, you know you're very special, don't you? Everyone is special, Aunt Lillian. It's just that sometimes people forget. And how come you never forget? Because the Emperor reminds me every day. He says that when you remember you're special, you can help others remember too. The child's simple words deeply moved all the adults present. In his 4 years of life, Matthew had developed a wisdom that many take decades to achieve. Well, said Franklin, I think we have a lot of work ahead of us. Dad, said Michael, are you sure you're ready for all this? Being a national reference is a huge responsibility. Son, a year ago I was about to lose everything because of pure pride. Today I have the chance to help children across the country. If that isn't life's preparation, I don't know what is. Walter, who had stayed quiet during the conversation, stepped closer to Franklin. Franklin, can I say something? Of course, Walter. When I started my schemes years ago, I thought I was building an empire. Now I see I was only destroying lives. But you're really building something that will last forever. Walter, you're part of this too now. Your redemption is a key part of our story. How so? Because it shows there's always hope. If you could change after years of doing wrong, imagine what we can do for the children we help here. Matthew let go of Sophie's hand and ran to Walter. Uncle Walter, the Emperor wants to talk to you. With me? Walter asked, surprised. Yes, come here. Matthew led Walter to the Emperor. The bull, who had initially been aggressive in the businessman's presence, now greeted him with the same calmness it showed the children. See? He's forgiven you, said Matthew. Now, you can be real friends. Walter hesitantly reached out and touched the Emperor's muzzle. The animal remained calm, allowing the contact. Matthew, Walter said, his voice trembling, how does he know I've changed? Animals can feel when people have a good heart. You've always had a good heart. You were just confused. The child's words brought tears to Walter's eyes. For the first time in years, he felt he truly belonged somewhere. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for giving me a second chance. You're welcome, Uncle. Now you can help others like Grandpa Frank helped me. Sophie, who had watched the whole interaction, approached Matthew. Matthew, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you know how to talk to animals? Matthew thought for a moment before answering. Actually, Sophie, everyone knows, they just forget when they grow up. The secret is to remember to keep a child's heart. And how do I do that? It's easy. You just have to believe animals are your friends and talk to them like you talk to me. Sophie smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given in months. Can I try? Of course. The Emperor is waiting. Sophie stepped closer to the bull and whispered, Hi, Emperor. I'm Sophie. Can I be your friend? The bull gently lowered its head as if saying yes. He said yes, Sophie exclaimed, turning to Matthew. I knew you'd get along. Dr. Lillian watched the scene with both professional and personal fascination. Franklin, she said, Matthew isn't just helping the children. He's teaching all of us about human connection. How so? Watch. He doesn't make a distinction between traumatized children, troubled adults like Walter, or large animals like the Emperor. To him, everyone deserves love and understanding. That's true, Catherine agreed. He treats everyone the same. And that's exactly what makes our project so special, continued Dr. Lillian. It's not just about animal therapy. It's about rediscovering our ability to connect with one another. Michael looked at his son playing with Sophie and the Emperor. Sometimes I wonder if we're the ones teaching Matthew, or if he's the one teaching us. Definitely him, replied Franklin. In just 4 years of life, he's already shown us more about forgiveness, hope, and love than many wisdom books ever could. Dad, said Michael, do you regret making that bet? Franklin looked at Matthew, then at Sophie, then at the entire therapy center that had grown around them. Son, if I hadn't made that bet, none of this would exist. Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead us to the most important breakthroughs. So you wouldn't change a thing? Oh, I'd change plenty. I'd change my pride, my stubbornness, my fear of asking for help. But the bet itself, it was the catalyst for all the good that came after. Walter, who had been listening, stepped closer. Franklin, I can say the same about my schemes. If I hadn't tried to hurt you, I'd never have discovered how good it feels to help people. See, said Matthew, appearing out of nowhere as only kids can. I told you bad things sometimes bring good stuff. Where did you learn that, grandson? Asked Franklin. The Emperor taught me. He said when he was little, the other bulls were mean to him, but that made him kinder because he didn't want other kids to feel sad like he did. Everyone fell silent for a moment, absorbing the depth of the child's insight. Matthew, said Dr. Lillian, you just explained one of psychology's most important concepts in a way any child could understand. What concept? That our pain can turn into compassion for others. That's right. The Emperor said pain teaches us not to hurt others. Sophie, who had been watching the conversation, tugged on Matthew's denim shirt. Matthew, does the Emperor teach other things too? Yeah, he knows lots of stuff. Want to learn? Yeah. Then come on. I'll introduce you to the other animals too. We've got horses, sheep, dogs. The two kids ran off, leaving the adults behind. It's amazing how he can get a traumatized child to open up in minutes, Catherine observed. That's his gift, said Franklin. And now we know that gift can help thousands of other kids. Dad, said Michael, can I confess something? Of course, son. When you made that bet, I thought you'd completely lost your mind. And I had. But sometimes you have to lose your mind to find your heart. And now? Now I know my real purpose in life wasn't raising cattle to sell. It was creating a place where kids could heal their hearts. Walter approached the group. Franklin, I just got an interesting call. From who? A children's rehab center in Washington, D.C. They want to send a group of kids to see our project. How many kids? 20. All with different kinds of trauma. My goodness, said Catherine. 20 kids at once. Can we handle that? Of course we can, Franklin said confidently. We've got the best team in the country, Matthew and the Emperor. Everyone laughed, but they knew he meant it. Over the past months, they'd seen the duo work miracles with kids. Other professionals had deemed hopeless. Actually, said Dr. Lillian, we've already been contacted by professionals from other countries too. Other countries? Michael asked, surprised. Yes, we've had interest from Canada, Australia, and even the United Kingdom. Matthew's project is going international, said Catherine, amazed. Dad, said Michael, do you realize the scale of what we're building here? I'm starting to, son, and I admit, sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed by the responsibility. Why? Because thousands of children around the world might come to depend on what we do here. Matthew and Sophie came running back, excited. Grandpa Frank, Sophie got to talk to the sheep Snowball. Did she really? Asked Franklin, smiling. She did, and she said something really important. What did she say? She said she feels safe here, that it's the first place she hasn't been scared since her daddy left. The comment struck all the adults present. The simplicity with which Sophie had expressed her transformation showed the real power of what they were doing there. Sophie, said Dr. Lillian, kneeling to the girl's height, do you really feel safe here? Yes, Because the animals don't yell, don't fight, don't leave. They just want to be our friends. And did Matthew help you see that? Matthew taught me I can trust again. He said the animals will always love me, even when I'm sad. Matthew, overhearing the conversation, moved closer to Sophie. And they will. The Emperor said you're special and that he'll always take care of you. How will he take care of me when I go back home? He said whenever you miss him or feel sad, just close your eyes and remember his warmth. The love of animals stays in our hearts forever. Matthew's words brought tears to the adult's eyes. Sophie's mother, who had arrived to pick her up, covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Matthew, Sophie's mother said, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me back my daughter." "You're welcome, ma'am, but Sophie was always here. She just needed to remember how to smile again." "And now she remembers?" "She does. And she'll teach other kids too, just like I do." Sophie looked at Matthew with admiration. "Can I really teach other kids?" "Of course. Everyone who heals here becomes a little teacher for the next kids who come." Dr. Lillian looked at Franklin. Matthew just explained one of the most important principles of group therapy. "What principle?" "That those who go through healing can help others through the same process. It means we're not just creating a therapy center, but a network of little healers." Catherine looked at Matthew with a mix of admiration and concern. "Sometimes I worry we're putting too much responsibility on his shoulders." "Mom," said Matthew, who had overheard, "it's not responsibility. It's fun. I like helping kids be happy." "But don't you want to play other things? Be a normal kid?" "I am a normal kid, and normal kids like helping their friends." Sophie nodded vigorously in agreement. "It's true, Aunt Catherine. Helping others is the best game in the world." Franklin looked at the two children and then at his family. "You know what? I don't think we're the ones taking care of the kids. They're the ones taking care of us." "How so, Dad?" "Matthew taught me about forgiveness when I was full of anger. Sophie taught me about courage when I was scared. Every child who comes here teaches us something." "It's true," agreed Dr. Lillian. "In all my years of practice, I've never learned as much about therapy as I have watching Matthew work." "And the best part," added Walter, "is that he doesn't even know he's working. To him, it's just play." "Maybe that's the difference," said Michael. "To Matthew, helping people isn't work. It's joy." "Dad," said Matthew, "can I say something important?" "Of course, son." "The Emperor wants everyone to know that he's very proud of you." "Why?" "Because you've learned that true wealth isn't money. It's love." The silence that followed was deep and meaningful. Every adult present reflected on their own journeys and how they had arrived at that moment. "Matthew," said Franklin, "how do you know these things?" "The Emperor tells me. And he's very wise because he's lived a long time and seen many people. And what else does he tell you? He says you're his favorite family of all because you've turned pain into love." Sophie looked at Matthew with curiosity. "Matthew, can I learn to talk to the Emperor like you do?" "Of course, it's easy. You just have to open your heart and listen with feeling, not just with your ears." "How do I do that?" "Come, I'll show you." The two children ran back to where the Emperor stood. The great bull welcomed them with his usual calm. "Okay, Sophie, now close your eyes and put your hand on the Emperor. Then think of a question and wait for the answer to appear in your heart." Sophie followed the instructions. She closed her eyes, placed her little hand on the bull's muzzle, and stayed quiet for a few moments. Suddenly her eyes opened and she beamed with joy. "Matthew, he talked to me." "He did? What did he say?" "He said I'm brave and that he'll always protect me." Matthew clapped his hands excitedly. "I knew you could do it. Now you can help other kids talk to him too." "Really?" "Of course. Now we're a team. You, me, and the Emperor." The adults watched the scene with admiration. It was impossible not to be moved, seeing two children who had arrived with trauma now becoming little therapists. "Franklin," said Sophie's mother, "how can I thank you for what you've done for my daughter?" "Ma'am, no thanks are needed. Seeing your daughter smile is the greatest thanks we could receive. But I want to do something. I want to help the project. If you really want to help, tell other families about what we do here. The best advertisement is the testimony of those who've lived the transformation." "I'll do that, and I'd also like to volunteer." I'm a teacher and can help with educational activities. Dr. Lillian joined the conversation. That's a wonderful idea. We're always in need of skilled volunteers. And how can I help? Asked Walter. Walter, said Franklin, you're already helping more than you realize. Your transformation is living proof that this project works for all ages. How so? You came here as a man full of anger and greed. Now you're one of our greatest supporters. That shows families' change is possible. Matthew ran back to the group, followed by Sophie. Grandpa Frank, I have an idea. What idea, my boy? What if we threw a party to celebrate Sophie learning to talk to the Emperor? A party? Yes, and we can invite all the kids who've been here. That way they can meet and share their experiences. Dr. Lillian looked at Matthew with admiration. Matthew, you just suggested something psychologists take years to implement. What? A reunion of former patients to strengthen the support network. I didn't understand those big words, but if it means a party, I like it. Everyone laughed. Dad, said Michael, I think Matthew's idea is excellent. We could make it a kind of project anniversary. And when should it be? Asked Catherine. How about the day it's been a year since the bet? Suggested Franklin. Great idea, agreed Walter. It'd be a symbolic way to celebrate how it all began. And can I invite my school friends? Asked Sophie. Of course, replied Matthew. The more friends, the better. The Emperor loves meeting new people. Actually, said Dr. Lillian, it would be good to open the event to the community. Many people still don't know about the work we do here. That's true, agreed Anthony Miller, who had arrived unnoticed. Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing the conversation about a party. Mr. Anthony, exclaimed Matthew, running to greet him. Matthew, my boy, how's our little therapist doing? I'm good, and I have a new friend, he said, pulling Sophie by the hand. This is Sophie. She talks to the Emperor now, too. Hello, Sophie. It's a pleasure to meet you. Sophie, who just a few months ago wouldn't speak to anyone, replied confidently. Hello, Mr. Anthony. Matthew taught me how to talk to animals. How wonderful. And what do they tell you? They say they're happy here and that they like helping kids be happy too. Anthony looked at Franklin with emotion. Franklin, you have no idea the impact this project is having on the region. What do you mean? I've gotten calls from mayors in nearby towns wanting to implement similar projects, and that's not all. What else? What? The Child Wellbeing Index in our area has risen significantly since the project started. Schools report fewer cases of kids with behavioral issues. Really? Asked Catherine, surprised. Really? You've created a positive ripple effect. The kids who come here return to their communities more confident and happy, influencing other children. Matthew tugged on Anthony's jacket sleeve. Mr. Anthony, does that mean the Emperor is helping kids he doesn't even know? Exactly, Matthew. Your work reaches much farther than you realize. The Emperor will be so happy when I tell him. Dr. Lillian approached Anthony. Anthony, it's good to see you here. I need to talk about expanding the project. Of course, what do you have in mind? We've received a proposal to create a national network of similar centers. Each state would have its own, but all would follow the model developed here. And what would our role be? We'd be the training hub. Professionals from across the country would come here to learn the methodology we've developed. Franklin felt a mix of pride and responsibility. Doctor, wouldn't that put too much pressure on Matthew? Actually, it's the opposite. By training others, we ensure Matthew's methodology is preserved and multiplied, reducing dependence on him. How so? Matthew would teach the first groups of professionals. They, in turn, would train others and so on. Matthew, who had been listening, interrupted. Does that mean I'll have lots of students? That's right, replied Dr. Lillian. You'd become a teacher for adults who want to learn how to help children. Cool. But are adults harder to teach than kids? Everyone laughed. Why do you say that? Asked Dr. Lillian. Because adults think too much with their heads and not enough with their hearts. Kids do the opposite. And how would you teach adults to think more with their hearts? Matthew thought for a moment. I guess I'd have to remind them of when they were kids and show them that animals only trust people with childlike hearts. Matthew's answer left all the adults silent. Once again, the child had summed up complex concepts of psychology and human development in just a few words. "Matthew," said Anthony, "do you realize you're talking about very important things?" "I am? To me, it's just normal talk." "That's why you're so special," said Sophie. "You say important things like they're simple. But they are simple. Adults are the ones who complicate everything." Franklin looked at his grandson with a mix of admiration and concern. "Matthew, would you like to teach adults?" "I would, but only if they promise to try to be more like kids, and if they can't. So I asked the Emperor for help. He's very good at teaching patience." Walter, who had been watching the conversation, stepped closer. "Matthew, I can tell you the Emperor has already taught me a lot about patience." "That's true. He told me you were learning really well." "And what else did he tell you about me?" "He said you have a good heart, but it was hurt for a long time, and now it's healing." Matthew's words touched Walter deeply, as he had spent the last few months reflecting on his personal transformation. "Matthew," he said, his voice choked up, "thank you for not giving up on me." "I never give up on people, Uncle Walter. The Emperor taught me that everyone can change if they have enough love." Catherine, who had been observing the interaction, walked over to her son. "Matthew, don't you think sometimes you set your expectations too high for people?" "What do you mean, Mom?" "Well, not everyone can change the way Uncle Walter did." Matthew thought for a moment before answering. "Mom, the Emperor taught me that we don't change people. We just show them they can change. And if they don't want to, then we keep showing them love until they're ready. And if they're never ready, the Emperor said they always are. It just takes longer for some people." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unfamiliar car. A family stepped out, a couple and a girl around 8 years old who walked with difficulty, leaning on crutches. Dr. Lillian went to greet them. "You must be the Wilson family. Welcome." "Thank you, Doctor. This is our daughter, Madison." Matthew immediately approached the new family. "Hi, I'm Matthew. This is the coolest place in the world." Madison looked at him shyly. "Hi, I'm Madison." "Madison is a pretty name. Want to meet my friend the Emperor?" The girl glanced uncertainly at her parents. "Is he safe?" she asked. "Very safe. He's the gentlest animal ever. And you know what's really cool?" "What?" "He doesn't care one bit if you walk differently. To him, what matters is the heart." Matthew's words filled Madison's eyes with tears. It was the first time in months someone had spoken about her disability so naturally and positively. "Can I meet him?" she asked. "Of course. Come with me." Matthew took Madison's free hand and slowly walked with her to where the Emperor stood. Sophie joined them. "This is Sophie," Matthew introduced. "She's new here too, but she's already learned how to talk to the Emperor." "How do you talk to him?" Madison asked. "It's easy," Sophie said. "You just have to speak with your heart, not your mouth." "I don't understand." "Come on, we'll show you," Matthew said. "Emperor, this is our new friend, Madison. She came to visit us." The bull looked at Madison and slowly approached. At first, the girl stepped back, but Matthew reassured her. "It's okay, Madison. He just wants to say hello." The Emperor stopped right in front of her and lowered his head, almost like a bow. "Wow!" Madison exclaimed. "It's like he's greeting me." "He really is," Sophie said. "Now you can touch him if you want." Madison let go of one crutch and reached out to touch the Emperor's muzzle. The bull stayed perfectly still. "He's so soft," she said, smiling for the first time. "And you know what's really cool?" Matthew asked. "What?" "He thinks you're perfect just the way you are." "How do you know?" "Because he told me. He said you're very brave." "Brave? Me?" "Of course. You came here even though you were nervous. That takes a lot of courage." Madison looked at Matthew, then at the Emperor. For the first time since the accident that left her struggling to walk, she felt seen for who she was, not for what she couldn't do. "Matthew," she said, "can I come here all the time?" "Of course. This is your home now, too." Madison's parents watched the scene with tears in their eyes. For months, They had tried unsuccessfully to get their daughter interested in activities or to make new friends. "Doctor," Madison's mother whispered to Dr. Lillian, "how does he do this?" "Honestly, I'm still trying to understand. Matthew has a gift that goes beyond any scientific explanation I know." "And does it work with all children?" "So far, yes. Every child responds differently, but they all respond." Franklin approached Madison's parents. "Welcome to our family. How did you hear about the project?" "Sophie's mother told us," Madison's father replied. "She said her daughter had rediscovered the joy of living here." "And where did you come from?" "Houston. It was a 3-hour trip, but after what we're seeing, every minute was worth it." "May I ask what happened to Madison?" "A car accident 6 months ago. She survived but was left with leg injuries. Since then, she's withdrawn from everything and everyone." "And today?" "Today is the first time I've seen her smile since the accident." Matthew ran up to the adults. "Grandpa Frank, Madison wants to know if she can sleep here to talk more with the Emperor." "Matthew," Franklin said, laughing, "she has to go home with her parents, but she can visit us whenever she wants." "What if her parents want to sleep here too?" Dr. Lillian looked at Franklin. "Actually, Matthew, it's not a bad idea. Many families from far away could benefit from residential programs." "Residential programs?" Catherine asked. "Yes, week-long stays where the whole family participates in the therapeutic process." "Would that be possible?" Madison's mother asked, intrigued. "With the structure we're developing, absolutely possible," Franklin replied. "Dad," Michael said, "wouldn't that require expanding the facilities even more?" "Yes, but remember what Anthony said about interest from other counties. Maybe it's time to think big." Matthew came running back with Madison and Sophie. "Grandpa Frank, we had an idea." "What idea now? What if we made a school here, a school where kids learn from the animals?" "Matthew," Dr. Lillian said, "you're suggesting animal-assisted education. I don't know those fancy words, but it's a school where animals are teachers too." "And what would they teach?" Catherine asked, amused. "The Emperor would teach patience," Matthew said. "The sheep Snowball would teach kindness," Sophie added. "And the horses would teach courage," Madison finished. The adults exchanged glances. Once again, the children had suggested something that could revolutionize both education and therapy. "You know what?" Anthony said. "It's not impossible. There are countries where schools already integrate formal education with animal therapy." "Really?" Michael asked. "Really. And considering the results you're getting here, it would be natural to move in that direction." Franklin looked at Matthew, who was excitedly explaining to Madison how to talk to different animals. "Son," he said to Michael, "I think our little project is about to become something much bigger than we ever imagined." "Dad, that scares me a little. Are we ready for so much responsibility?" "Michael, a year ago, I thought I was ready to make a $3 million bet. Today I know I wasn't even ready to manage my own ranch, but I've learned that preparation comes along the way." "How so?" "Life teaches us as we face challenges, and we have the best teacher possible, the wisdom of children." Walter joined the conversation. "Franklin, can I make a proposal?" "Of course." "How about we create a foundation? It would be easier to receive donations and investments to expand the project." "Foundation?" "Yes, we could call it the Animal Heart Foundation or something like that." "And who would run it?" "All of us. You as president, Michael as vice president, Catherine handling the educational side, me managing finances." "What about Matthew?" asked Sophie, who had come closer. "Matthew would be our director of happiness," replied Walter, smiling. "I like that," said Matthew. "Being director of happiness sounds fun." "And can I be assistant director?" asked Sophie. "Of course," replied Matthew. "And Madison can be our special assistant." Madison beamed with joy. "I'd love that." Dr. Lillian watched the children's interaction. "Do you realize what's happening here?" she asked. "What?" asked Catherine. "We're witnessing the spontaneous creation of a therapeutic community led by children. And is that good? It's revolutionary. In most therapeutic programs, adults lead and children follow. Here, it's the opposite." "And does it work better?" "Apparently, yes. The children feel empowered, responsible for their own healing and for other children's too." Matthew ran up to Dr. Lillian. "Aunt Lillian, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Matthew." "When we grow up, do we forget how to be kids, or do we just pretend we forgot?" The question took Dr. Lillian by surprise. "Why do you ask that?" "Because sometimes it seems like adults know the answers, but pretend they don't, to make things complicated." "What kind of answers?" "Like how loving is more important than making money, how forgiving is better than staying angry, how helping others makes us happier than just thinking about ourselves." Dr. Lillian was silent for a moment before answering. "Matthew, I think you just asked the most important question an adult can hear." "What question?" "Whether we forget how to be kids or just pretend we forgot." "And what's the answer?" "I think every adult has to find their own answer." Matthew nodded as if he understood perfectly. "The Emperor said some adults just need permission to be kids again." "Permission from who?" "Themselves." The end of the story. So, what did you think of this heartwarming story? Do you believe Matthew truly had that special gift, or was it just the purity of a child touching hearts? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other stories that will stir your emotions. Thank you for joining us on this journey.